Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Okay, hello everyone, and let me take this off the screen. I'm starting late. I really don't expect live comments. Had an awful lot to do. Oh boy, it's cold down here. But I wanted to do a show, for one thing, because I put makeup on, and I wasn't about to put makeup on and then go to bed. Like, well, I mean, I'd wash it off first, but like, what's the point? So I decided I have to make time, no matter what. So I do see there are some people watching because I see the like button, and thank you. That reminds me to do the YouTube stuff. I've been getting a lot of new viewers from my YouTube shorts. So if you are one of those people, welcome. Please hit subscribe. And if you like the video, hit like. And listen, engagement's engagement. If you want to hit dislike, and here I am getting paranoid about my lipstick. Do I have lipstick on my teeth? Nope. Always so paranoid about that. One time, it's like when you think the monster's gonna grab you under the bed, you're like, oh my God, like I keep checking under the bed. What if one day there actually was a monster there? Well, one day I did look in the mirror and I actually did have lipstick on my teeth and like freak out. I'd rather not know. I'm sure you guys would let me know. But anyway, please subscribe if you have not already. Been growing in subscribers, and I really appreciate that. You can also follow me on Twitter. My name is, with that unusual spelling, Karen Ann Harlos on Twitter. Forget Facebook and MeWe. I've kind of left Facebook. I do some very limited things there, but I don't haunt Facebook. It's just way too censorious. And MeWe, you might as well just, there's tumbleweeds. I need to, you know, I wonder if I can edit this right now to take that out. Oh my God, look at this, I can. Oh, it's beautiful. And actually, let's edit this right now. Let's put Twitter in front. You can follow me on Facebook, but I'm hardly ever there. So there's my Twitter. Oh my goodness, I keep saying that I was going to do that. Now I can do it on the fly. This program is wonderful. And last but not least, this show is made possible by my patrons. So please, if you can, become a patron at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty, or if you are watching on Twitch, become a subscriber there. And if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can do it for free. But that is all of the, ooh, didn't mean to do that. How do I get rid of this? There we go. That's all the housekeeping I am going to do. If you are one of the few hardy souls that have stayed up this late to watch, please interact in comments. I would really, really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to get right to the content. And this is a recent video from Matt Walsh, and I believe it was entitled, "What if we started treating criminals this way?" And it had to do with, I don't even know if you want to call it criminal justice reforms. I'm sure that's what the government there, and there we're talking about El Salvador. I'm sure that's what they are calling it, but I would call it criminal justice deforms. And we had noticed before in a prior video dealing with Matt, that Matt seems to have a sadistic streak. He seems to take a lot of delight in the punishment of people. And okay, whatever, fine. And I do see there's comments. I'm now going to put the comments on the screen. So hello, both of you. I find it very odd as someone who claims to be a devout Christian. Like, I watch Matt and I almost want to do that joke that we used to put up on an old boss's door. It was, is it the God of the New Testament or the Old Testament today? Don't come for me, Christians. I understand it's the same God. It's a joke. Ha ha. You're allowed to laugh. Christians with no sense of humor are like bad. They're the worst. You got to be able to joke. So it's, Matt is more often the God of the Old Testament. I swear Matt would enthusiastically advocate bringing stoning in the streets back. Honestly. And hello, Andrew. It's been a bit. It's been a minute. So we had talked before where he was really enthusiastic. Was it, oh crap, what was the country? Oh, I'm losing it. I keep wanting to say Saigon, which isn't a country. Malaysia. I believe it was Malaysia, where they cane people publicly, and that sheer delight that he had when he was talking about how some criminals, because they're drug dealers, I obviously believe that's a victimless crime, but how some criminals were caned so badly that they could no longer control their bowels for life, if I remember correctly. And I'm like, that's pretty gross for a Christian to be taking delight in. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And he does that in this. So he's going to be praising the criminal justice deformation in El Salvador and talking about the very real criminal problem we have in this country. I'm going to concede that right up front. Singapore, that was it. Singapore? Or was it Malaysia? Whatever. I'm such a provincial American. You all might remember that video. But I think it was Singapore. But he was talking about the beautiful airports. But anyway, so I'm not going to deny that our cities have a terrible crime problem. And the way that we're handling it is not working. He'll get no argument from me. But we'll get into that more. Let's play the clips. And it's the clips that are the last few that start to get seriously concerning for anyone who thinks that Matt actually cares about liberty. And this authoritarian, theocratic sadism is truly, truly frightening. Let's go.
Now, browse news reports on the violent crime wave in this country, and invariably, you'll hear the same excuses. They'll tell you that COVID is responsible for the murder rate. They'll do what the San Francisco city supervisor did and blame systemic issues like policing. What they won't do is tell you that actually a real and immediate solution to this problem is available. In El Salvador, under the leadership of Nayib Bukele, they have figured out a solution. In 2018, the year before Bukele took office, El Salvador posted a murder rate of 51 per 100,000 people.
I see people saying I'm on mute. So sorry. I always forget that. Let me get my little thing here. I do that because I'm listening through the speaker and I don't want it to blare out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So what I was saying is, notice that he said that this is a possible solution that is right before us. So I can't be accused later of straw manning Matt, that he was just using this as a hypothetical, like, look what they're doing here. It's terrible, but at least they're dealing with their crime problem. No, he is sadistically actually proposing this as a solution for our country. And if only we would have the testicular fortitude to implement this kind of solution, it would just be wonderful. I am not strawmanning him here. He is literally... Well, he literally couldn't do this because, you know, what is a woman? But he is figuratively getting wet over this. So let's continue here.
Which is the New Orleans rate. By 2022, the murder rate in the country had fallen to 7.8 per 100,000 people. That's 7.8, not 78. This chart, we have a chart here we can show you that shows the magnitude of the decline. You can see that the murder rate was decreasing before Bukele took over, but he took it to an unprecedented low level. I mean, this is a homicide rate now in El Salvador that's significantly lower than what you'll find in several major American cities. And these are not cooked numbers, okay? You know that because Nayib Bukele is overwhelmingly popular in El Salvador. People know that murders are down. They know that they are safer in their communities because they live in these communities. They don't need the government to tell them about it.
Okay, I'm going to accept that these aren't cooked numbers, but his reasoning for saying they're not cooked numbers is dubious at best. Just because he's popular doesn't mean they're not cooked numbers. When you're dealing with other countries, particularly with authoritarians, you can't particularly always trust the numbers. It's like when you hear in some dictatorships that the dictator was reelected unanimously. Well, he was actually elected by the people. Okay, but was that? But let's take as true for sake of argument that he is legitimately very popular amongst the populace and that the crime rate is decreasing. I have no problem taking any of those as granted. I just wanted to point out that the way Matt confidently states things and says, well, obviously these aren't cooked numbers because X is extremely flawed. It does not prove what he's trying to prove. But it's kind of irrelevant to the argument. I just wanted to point that out because Matt does these types of sleight of hands very, very often. And his diehard fans just unthinkingly slaver over this.
El Salvador accomplished this massive reduction in homicides, if you can believe it, by doing something radical. They decided to start punishing criminals. Specifically, Bukele implemented something called the Territorial Control Plan, and phase 1 of that plan involved flooding.
Okay, I want to stop. Yes, punishing criminals, I think, is actually something desirable, potentially. Let me explain. Something has to be done with criminals. If you go back to earlier LP planks, they actually focused on restitution and restitution to the people actually harmed and not to the state. Like the fact that a crime is the state versus Jones, as if Jones sinned against the state rather than against the people he actually harmed, is really, really perverse. But let's even take for granted that some form of restorative justice or restitutional justice isn't ideal. Let's even put aside that as a libertarian fantasy. Let's say punitive justice is the only type, but let's take that as true for the sake of argument. Okay, Matt, one solution to crime, I agree, is to do something with criminals, and we'll take as true for sake of argument that the do something has to be a type of retribution, a type of punishment, and that in the there's a word for it, retributive sense rather than restitutive sense. I might be making up words here. That's okay. So let's just take that as granted. Okay, I do agree that's a problem. We have these extraordinarily left-wing prosecutors, DA's offices that just decide that they're not going to punish or do anything to criminals, particularly if they are perceived to be of a minority or some other oppressed class. They just get released out to re-victimize. Yes, that's a problem. I think we can all agree upon that. I do think there's a further problem where you do need to have a path to redemption. That might be the Christian in me speaking, but you definitely need a plan towards restoration of the victim. And the victim was not the state. The victim is not the state in crimes. I find that obscene beyond measure.
High crime areas with heavily armed police officers. Many criminals with gang affiliations, often indicated by their tattoos, which are often on their face, easy to see, went to prison. Officials paraded them before cameras in a humiliation ritual. This has been an integral part of El Salvador's strategy for years.
Okay, yeah, bring back All right, Matt. You know, when you start talking about humiliation rituals, okay, fine. Parade them for the public in a humiliation ritual. I obviously don't agree with that. And let me get something out front here. I'm not squeamish or carry a torch or have some soft bleeding heart towards violent, coercive violators of other people's rights. I'm going to give you an argument that I gave about the death penalty. I believe that it says something about us as a people on how we treat the worst among us, on how we treat the monsters. And when you treat monsters monstrously, it turns you into monsters. It does something to the soul of a society not to be better than the worst among you, and to take a perverse delight in it rather than a sense of profound sadness that it came to this. As a Christian, I think it's honoring the imago Dei, the image of God in each person. But also as a libertarian, I think it does something to the human spirit to delight in this type of humiliation, as he says, or barbarism that's going to be coming up next. You treat the prisoners or the criminals humanely, not merely for their sake. You treat them that way for the sake of your own soul and the soul of society. I've often said in death penalty cases, another victim of the death penalty, forget about the person being executed for a moment. It's the people that have to do the executing. That's one reason we used to have firing squads, to try to diffuse out the guilt so that none of the executioners knew which one it was that fired the deadly shot. We knew that that did something terrible to the people that had to carry it out. And I do think that reflects out to society. The people who have to carry out prison executions, we are doing something terrible to them and asking that to happen as a society. And I don't think that's something we consider nearly enough. Let's go to the next clip.
The only remaining question is whether saving these lives and restoring order to society and making communities livable again is worth a few sacrifices. Most notably, is it worth sacrificing some of what we in modern Western society consider to be humane standards for imprisonment? Is it worth sacrificing some of those standards?
Notice he said, sorry, I had to mute again there for a second. I'm looking at the screen and it's reminding me, I need to put up a big poster sign here. But notice he said the only remaining question is if we're willing to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. Boy, that was a jump to go from here's a problem to here's El Salvador and yep, that's the solution. Just do we have the balls to do it? No, that's not the only remaining question, Matt. You just did this huge jump without even alerting people to it. But if we're going to deal with this remaining question, as you put it, no, it's not worth it to sacrifice our respect for the inherent value of life of both the victim and the perpetrator, and the damage to the psyche of us all to turn into monsters. That is a question you never address. Matt just paints it, that the you in that former sentence was Matt. Matt simply paints it as this panacea without realizing the other unintended consequences. But notice how blithely he said, well, you know, you either want dead grandma or you think we can treat prisoners a little bad, as if those are the only choices here. That is so typical. I mean, we hear this very constantly as libertarians, wherein we advocate for freedom, and our listeners immediately translate that to, you want grandma to die in the streets. This is no different.
In response to that question, the media has answered unanimously in the negative. The Sun, for example, just published a lengthy piece lamenting the conditions in El Salvador's prisons. Inmates are crammed together like sardines, the Sun says. Quote, in each 100 square meter cell, around 75 crammed inmates sleep on metal cabins and are forced to share just 2 toilets and 2 sinks. Several other outlets have run similar stories in recent days, talking about how terrible it is in these prisons in El Salvador, how it's all a human rights violation. Here's the BBC, for example. Watch.
Relatives of those detained have been desperately trying to find out what's happened to them. I saw the video on Facebook and I was going through it, pausing and rewinding.
Okay, we're going to stop here a second. Just put yourself in the position of these prison guards. You don't think this is doing something to them? Now, of course, you might just say, like, it's terrible people that get attracted to those jobs, but we don't know that. That could be true for even the majority of them. But still, knowing this is happening in your country, you don't think that does something to the psyche of the average citizen as well? To treat human beings, no matter what they've done, in this manner. To treat them worse than you would cattle.
He was almost unrecognizable, so very thin. I only knew it was him by his tattoos. Angelica says her husband has no links with gangs. She's heard nothing further about him since he was arrested under emergency powers brought in March 2022 by President Bukele.
Okay, so I know there was a bit of an accent there, and, I did piece clips together, but basically they showed the conditions in these prisons, and then they interviewed the wife of somebody who apparently didn't even get notified. So never mind the guilty person. Think of the trauma to this family. Even if a loved one did something wrong, they're still a loved one. And this could have been a wife that was dependent upon the income of of her husband. There could be children involved, and she had no idea what happened to her husband. She had to scan news broadcasts in order to see if she could catch a glimpse of him in that mass of people, and she did, and almost didn't recognize him because he looked so thin and malnourished. And she says, whether it's true or not, we don't know, that he had no connections to gangs. Because what the justification is for this barbaric treatment is that it was a mass roundup of gangs. She says he wasn't. We don't know, and you'll soon find out. Neither does the frickin' government in this particular case.
The BBC has found that at full capacity, each person would have 0.58 square meters of space. The International Committee of the Red Cross recommends 3.4 square meters in a shared cell.
Okay, so this prison does not live up to the standards of the Red Cross or the UN or any Western human rights watchdog group. It's very, very uncomfortable to be in prison in El Salvador right now. So uncomfortable.
It's more than uncomfortable, it's torturous. And it's funny the way he extols the values and we need to save Western civilization. But when it comes to these certain values of Western civilization, that you treat people under your power humanely, well, he just scoffs at that. That's silly.
The fact that it might even make you think twice about joining a gang in that country to begin with, which is obviously the point. Now, with that said, we hear from someone in the clip who claims that at least one of the inmates, her husband, has no connection to gangs. He's an innocent man caught up in the crackdown, caught up in the net.
Okay, let's stop for a second. That wasn't all she said. She said that when he was caught up in the net, she wasn't even notified, that she didn't know what happened to him. Was he arrested? She suspected so, from what we can read into that. Was he dead? This woman, and there could be children involved, had to scan news broadcasts, desperately hunting for the face of her husband. You don't think she's a victim of what the state is doing here?
And we have no way of assessing whether that story is true, obviously. We don't know. Is this person innocent or guilty? How do we know? But if we're being honest, we probably can assume that some non-violent people, even some innocent people, have been caught unwittingly in this net. Some of them may be innocent. True. I mean, anytime the government assumes emergency powers and arrests more than 70,000 people without ensuring their due process rights, it's bound to happen.
Take that in. They were arresting 70,000 people and providing none of them due process. So not only do we not know if this man was, in fact, in a gang or not in a gang, neither does the government. They didn't even make a pretense of trying to find out. And that should horrify you. And the fact that it doesn't horrify Matt should make you just tremble that men with ideas such as his should ever have an ounce of power over you and yours. It is really, really repulsive. And the way he's just saying that there in his comfortable flannel plaid shirt just makes me want to retch in my mouth. And it's not because I have a bleeding heart towards criminals.
And yes, it's almost certainly true that many of these inmates live in conditions that would make Amnesty International extremely squeamish. There's no reason to paper over that. But that's not where the discussion ends or where it should end. The question that follows is a simple...
Yes, treating people humanely is where the discussion should end. We need to be better than that. And the fact that it doesn't end there for Matt is extremely troubling. Now, when I say end there, it doesn't mean, well, then we can't do anything about the crime problem. I'll invoke Nozikian side constraints again, that there is a path of solutions, but in that path of solutions, you have to stay within your lane. Shades of Laura Epke when it comes to COVID. Traumatized. But you need to stay in your lane. You need to not cross the boundaries. So just because the conversation ends there with that, it doesn't mean the entire conversation about what we do with criminals. It means that that avenue is closed off. So let's look for another avenue. But the fact that that isn't a big stop sign for Matt is sociopathic.
One, though it's rarely discussed. And the question is this: would you rather have a safe society where a few innocent people are imprisoned, or would you rather have a very dangerous society where only a few guilty people are imprisoned?
When you have 70,000 people imprisoned en masse without due process, you think it's just a few. It's just a few. Those people are acceptable. Is it basically what Matt is saying for the society that he wants, and that probably a lot of us would want, a safe one? You know, things like that, you are acceptable collateral damage. Now, he's going to deal with this a bit later and try to refute that point, so I will deal with my further refutation at that point. But just let the horror of that sink in. I guess that's great if you think you're one of the people that would never be targeted because you don't have tattoos or whatever it might be. But do you think human rights violations stop there? No, they keep going. And what does Matt have to say to the people who are unjustly just caught up in this? Sucks to be you. You're the price we pay for a civilized society.
Ben Franklin famously answered a version of that question. He said, it's better for 100 guilty persons to escape than one innocent person to suffer. And we hear people repeat this mantra unthinkingly all the time, but Ben Franklin...
It's not unthinkingly. Maybe it is for some people. I've certainly given a great deal of thought to it. And if you're a libertarian who's an individualist, you should have given, well, those two terms are synonymous. Libertarian is individualist. You should have given a great deal of thought to this. No person should be considered expendable in order to ensure the safety of others. That is, now Matt doesn't claim to be a libertarian, so this is more a plea to anyone here who might even be somewhat persuaded by this and you consider yourself a libertarian. This is absolutely anti-libertarian to its core. There are no amount of people that are an acceptable sacrifice, a knowing acceptable sacrifice. Matt will later say, and I am going to anticipate this argument because you may think of it, that perfection isn't on the table, that even with all the protections in place, there will always be innocent people who are unjustly determined to be guilty. Yes, but you've done everything reasonable and ethical to prevent that. If you go out to a firing range that is certified safe and you followed all the safety protocols, but someone still gets hurt, that is something that's acceptable because you have taken all reasonable precautions. But there are no reasonable precautions here. The people that get caught up in this that are innocent are just simply swept away as collateral damage. And if you were in the country of Matt's wet dreams, that could be you. And I know Matt doesn't ever think it could be him or one of his children, but it could.
Franklin didn't address what happens when all those guilty people get out of prison and make it impossible for innocent people to live their lives. What happens when allowing guilty persons to escape means that innocent people can't start businesses or use the subway or go to the store, walk down the street, or guarantee the safety of their children?
And that is an issue. But the way you solve that is not by eliminating protections to try to keep innocent people from being convicted as guilty or suffering for the sake of the others. That is a gross violation of rights. There isn't acceptable collateral damage unless you have done everything reasonable to mitigate that. And Matt is completely arguing against any kind of mitigation or any kind of reasonable mitigation, where he thinks just these dragnets of 70,000 people without any due process is acceptable. That is gross, it's anti-Christian, and it's horrific. And shame on you, any of his fans that are applauding this. Kiss my libertarian ass.
What happens when letting the guilty go free means letting them randomly assault elderly people or carjack women at the stoplight or execute gas station cashiers for the few dollars?
Okay, we're going to stop here for a second, because in the earlier clip, and I didn't mention this, I meant to, and then I just got off on a little bit of my rampage. But he talked about what happens when you let these people out of prison and they commit more crimes. Is Matt suggesting just that all criminals should be in prison for life? Now, maybe that was just sloppy wording on his part, that he was more referring to ridiculously reduced sentences or ridiculously lax guidelines. Perhaps. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt with this. But he's like letting these people escape. Like, what does he mean by that? That they're literally escaping from prison, or does he mean escape justice? In which case, I agree with him. We do have an issue where it seems like people that should not get these super long and punitive sentences are, and then people who like literally should, if we're only dealing with a punitive system, are let go. We do need to look at this sort of situation. But the answer isn't becoming monstrous and confining people worse than you would treat a dog. They are still human beings.
In the cash register. That's unfolding now in major cities all across the country. It's happening so often that CNN is capturing it on camera unintentionally. This is not the high trust society that existed in the 19th century.
So basically, it's like, because we're not in a high trust society, therefore you can't have basic rights. Now, he pointed out a lot of issues. The fact that in a lot of these cities, people can't defend themselves. Maybe that's a better solution, where you can make people fear to do crimes because people have the right to defend themselves, which we have disarmed and prevented people from doing. Maybe that's the way we should fix it, rather than thinking you can pen up a human being. And I forgot what the cubic space was, but I know, like, what was the size of it? Was it a 100-meter cell, had 75 people and 2 toilets? Like, okay.
When Barack Obama was in office, he made a habit of calling difficult decisions, quote, false choices. He said that we should, for example, reject the, quote, false choice between our security and our ideals.
Okay, let's stop here for a second. I agree with Barack Obama there, even though he was probably speaking out of both sides of his mouth. You should be, as a libertarian, hearkening back to another quote. This should remind you of what I think it was Benjamin Franklin said: those who would give up liberty for security deserve and get neither. But that's exactly what Matt is arguing for. He's arguing for sacrificing your fellow man selfishly for your own illusion of security, meanwhile letting the state prevent you from defending yourself. You don't have any right to sacrifice other people for your safety. Now, I agree, we want safety. Let's find a liberty-honoring way of achieving it. This ain't it, brah.
But the truth is that there are hard choices to be made when weighing our security against our ideals. This is not a false choice. There are actual trade-offs you have to make. And there's no sense in lying about it. As Richard Hanania pointed out recently on his Substack, sometimes a slavish devotion to ideals gets a lot of people killed, and it ruins livelihoods. Nobody wants to talk about that, but it's true.
Oh boy, that is the first, well, that's not the first, that's the first through the 20th step on the road down to tyranny. If you don't have your principles, you don't have your integrity. And if you don't have your integrity, you don't have anything. When all options are on the table, as long as you can invoke safety and security, that, my friends, is hell. We all want a safe society. Let's find a liberty-honoring way of achieving it. Barack Obama was right there. He is presenting a false choice. There are other options. Just because we have a failed system now doesn't mean you go to the other extreme of tyranny.
And as more criminals act with total impunity, it's getting hard to ignore. Besides, the other point here is that nobody can claim that they really have a zero tolerance for, for example, innocent people going to prison. We like to say that, well, we can't allow a single innocent person to go to prison.
Way to be pedantic. Pedantic much, Matt? No, that you're hyper-literalizing that statement. The statement means you take what are reasonable precautions, which he's advocating throwing out the window. Yes, perfection is not on the table. That's like saying you can't be against murder unless you believe that murder can ever be completely eradicated. And I don't think anyone believes that. But you do what you can to reduce it, realizing that zero is never going to happen. You do what you can reasonably with human dignity, due process rights, to minimize the damage, realizing it'll never be at zero. But you never purposely just go, whah! As I said before, you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. Boy, is that omelet delicious.
Because the only way to bring that number down to zero is to have no prisons at all. If you have any kind of prison system, there's going to be that kind of unintended consequence. Regardless, it's going to happen. And we all accept that tacitly. We have to, or we cannot have a civilization. But we're currently in the process of losing our civilization, and it's in part because modern Western people have a totally upside-down view of these kinds of trade-offs.
Notice the sleight of hand he did again? Without proposing, just having an actual justice system that has very strong due process, without advocating that perhaps some things shouldn't be crimes, that is causing the proliferation of gangs to begin with, that if we, of course, he'll get into vices and all of that, but as a libertarian, we'd say half of the gang problems would be solved if you just legalized drugs. If you didn't make everything under the sun a crime. Now, of course, Matt would have a problem with that. So instead, he goes to this police state mentality where, some people are going to get screwed over, but it's worth it because I feel safe. And yes, there will always be innocent people caught up if you're going to punish criminals, which you do, whatever kind of justice system. We are accepting punitive for the sake of argument here. If you punish criminals, yes, but you do everything you can to mitigate that. There is no such thing as perfection in any system.
Or they're so naive that they think that we can have no trade-offs. But that's not the case. You can't get around it. Either you emphasize justice, social order, and punishing criminals, and you deal with the collateral damage that comes with this harsher and more brutal approach, or you emphasize tolerance and acceptance and rehabilitation and forgiveness, and you deal with the collateral damage that comes with that.
Oh boy. And notice he admitted that what he's advocating is harsh and brutal. And that's why I made the joke about the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament. Which one is it today? And again, Christians, don't come for me. It's a loose analogy. I know it's not theologically correct. But there is no grace at all in Matt. For a Christian devoid of grace. That's what offends me the most. If you truly wanted justice, Matt, you would think God should strike you down right now. Because as a Christian, you have believed that we have sinned against the creator of the universe and that the wages of sin is death. But you were shown grace, but you cannot find it at all in your black heart to show that at all to your fellow man who is created in the image of God. This is a stench in the nostrils of God, in my opinion. There needs to be some grace mixed in here. Grace along with justice. When you go to complete just letting criminals go, that's one spectrum of hell. Oh, look, I didn't even know. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a wig I have hanging up here that I didn't even, like a hairpiece. I should have put that on. That would have been cute with this. And I just noticed it hanging up there. But so you go from the extreme end of just, you know, complete antinomianism, where you just let the guilty go free. But he's just swinging to the other extreme of not even caring, of just determining a certain percentage is acceptable collateral damage. And you wonder how we end up with drone strikes that kill families at weddings. Well, you know, if we're going to be secure, that is just going to be acceptable damage. You want to know what? That's not acceptable to me. What's acceptable to me is to always continually strive to minimize that number, realizing it will never be at zero. I think we have one more clip. No, maybe two. Let's see.
You will get the collateral damage either way. There's no way around it. In the former case, it means that you'll have a safer and more orderly society where people can live their lives and your children can walk outside without.
Will you actually have a safer society? I mean, superficially you might. You'd also have one that has some serious trauma to its psyche. But would you think it's safer if you happen to be one of these people caught up in the dragnet? Was it safer for you? Or are you just the acceptable sacrifice? How is, like, you know, I'm thinking of the Incas. You know, if 10 virgins need to die and have their hearts ripped out for the common good of the civilization, well, that's just a price we're willing to pay. Do you want to be the sacrificial virgin, Matt? I don't think so.
Fear, but criminals will be made very uncomfortable and will be treated in ways that are sometimes quite ugly. And in the latter case, criminals will be more comfortable and prisons will not be such an ugly place, but your communities will be unlivable cesspools.
And again, that is the horns of the false dilemma. And you don't think that losing your freedom, and maybe it's just because I'm a libertarian and I value my freedom so highly that imagining being caged at all, even in humane conditions, is just utterly horrifying to me. That is a punishment of itself. You don't need to brutalize people. Caging them is a harsh punishment in and of itself. And imagining yourself being, and I'm sorry, I'm super, super tired. I was up early and working hard all day. So I know I'm not like I usually am. Well, maybe I'm not usually like that. Maybe I'm just getting old. But imagine yourself in the type of world that Matt is envisioning. You know, it would almost be like this weird payback where you might have been rah-rah for this until you got caught up. When you're giving the power of just denying due process and brutalizing people to the government, don't you think, like we're even starting to see now, that that'll be used and manipulated against political opponents as well. That all of this power that you're given to the state, I know, Matt, you're having these wet dreams that it'll be your right wing, perfect rulers that are in place. But would you want to give this power to an extreme left-wing government? Be careful what you wish for. Yeah, there is one more clip. Oh, did we finish that one? No, we didn't. Hold on. We got to finish this one, then there's one more.
Fools. As I've said before, there will be ugliness in society no matter what. You can choose to contain it in prison, or you can let it loose on the streets.
And of course, containing it the way he's suggesting will create a psychic ugliness in society. Because I do think we are judged on how we treat sometimes the worst of us, just like we're judged on how we treat the most helpless among us. When you have people in your power, once you've captured somebody and you have them within your power, you have to treat them humanely, or you're no longer human.
Great news, fatties.
Oh my God,
Scientists
great
are
news,
promising
fatties.
that soon.
This is an old Michael Knowles clip. I already did this show. Let me go back up here. Okay, after such a heavy video, that was great. After all that talk of brutalizing people, then you got Michael Knowles come on. Great news, fatties. I did a video on that where I took Michael Knowles to the woodshed for like shaming, just, oh God, the smug self-righteousness of the Daily Wire crew. It's pretty bad when like Ben Shapiro is the most moderate of them. And I don't dislike Ben Shapiro. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but he's by far the best of that lot. You got Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh, who are two sides of the same coin, except for, Matt is funnier in his dry way, and Michael Knowles just has that boyish smile. They've got the two completely different personalities. Then you got Candace Owens, who is just insufferable, in my opinion. I think she's just got something about her that is just thoroughly dislikable. That doesn't mean she's always wrong. Doesn't mean she can't be personable. But in general, she reminds me, even though she's much more attractive and, dresses much more smartly, of that disapproving school marm in that picture with Jaden with the "Don't Tread on Me" patchwork. Candace just reminds me of that. So Ben Shapiro by far is the best of that lot. I don't even know where I was going with that, but good news, fatties. Okay, that now is it for this evening. I am going to, though, give it a few minutes to see if there's any comments or last minute super chats or whatever there may be. And please do go check out my YouTube shorts. Those have been doing extraordinarily well. I don't know if there'll be any good clips from this show to extract out for shorts, but hopefully there will be. It gets the content to an entirely different audience that tends to watch shorts. But otherwise, I hope you have an awesome night. And I do plan on broadcasting tomorrow. We shall see. It will probably be starting history again, which of course is my first love of LP history. But until then, have an awesome evening. Mi guapas de Libertad.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they want to